Continuing. I'll try a couple things here. First of all, I want to add something that I didn't really have in the original line drawing, but I'm going to make sort of a shape for the cast shadow that would be being cast by this upper outer rim onto the main part of the planter here. For cylindrical things, this is always very fun because a lot of times there's a really sharp, clean cast shadow that would continue on theoretically, but the form shadow, because the plant is rounding, there's a gradual darkening for the overall shape here. So there's an interesting transition from trying to create something with a really sharp, crisp edge to a really not crisp edge. So I definitely don't try to do that all in one pass, because that's even trickier. But I'm gonna kind of check this out. I'll probably mostly just try to make it clear where the cast shadow is towards the front, and then probably not worry too much about how clear it is, and then on a later pass come in with a little bit more to emphasize the form shadow. This is some dark quin mixes with burnt orange and a little bit of rose and a little bit of indigo in there as well. So this is just going to be like this. Shadows are a wonderful thing. It was one of the first things that really got me into watercolor painting, was seeing artists who would really do some gorgeous treatments of shadow. So that would be getting cast like that, and I'm gonna kind of just imagine that it would roll around the form a little bit like that. Quite tricky to do to have combined a crisp edge and a soft edge in one pass on something in watercolor. I do want to make sure this is the value change is dark enough to read like a real shadow. Let me see, I was down here. So I'm kind of just trying to make things darker as I get towards the back side of this one. Dropping in a little bit more of the darker mix of quin burnt orange and indigo. That's okay for now. It's going to dry okay, I think, even if I sort of shift things around. What I'm going to do now is get a little bit more organized, and I'm going to do this. Obviously, I've turned it upside down. I'm going to work on this green wall part. A couple things on this. I want to. This is one of those shapes that's sort of odd, so I might end up using a couple different brushes just to sort of try to get it wet in somewhat of an even fashion. The other thing, well, I'm thinking about several things. I'm thinking about trying to clean up some of these lines as I'm working on it, and I'm trying to a little bit more true to my reference photo of building a little bit more transition of darker here to darker there. I think I'm mostly going to be using ultramarine blue, but that may change. I may add in a little bit of yellow depending on how the mood strikes me. Let me see. I think I'll start with my smaller number 4 brush. Mostly what I'm focused on is trying to get this may be biting off more than one pass worth as I'm starting it. I think trying to combine tasks is something that you learn much more over time. But you can certainly just do one pass where you're trying to kind of clean up some edges. So I'm just scrubbing away a little bit of the color that's of the paint that got where I didn't want it to be. I wonder how that happened. Some artist was probably trying to paint and talk at the same time, or he's just kind of sloppy. So if you wanted to you know, do a pass with clear water and just kind of focus on cleaning up edges, that's a perfectly valid way of spending your time, and then letting that dry and then coming back and kind of doing what I'm going to continue doing here. And the tricky thing is that I do want to try to keep my edges somewhat crisp for this front part of this green wall. So trying to make sure that everything in a really random shape like this, irregular shape, stays wet is a fun little challenge that you can work on and get better at. And if that wasn't enough, I am going to try to even though I'm upside down, to try to define what that leaf or what that part of the tree would sort of be like. That's really quite odd as it's upside down as I'm thinking about it. I don't know if you can tell, but I will sort of tip. I am holding my paper and board at an angle, and I will certainly kind of change the angle that I'm tipping it depending on how wet an area is, and if I need to get something really wet, and then like this is a real odd shape and I need to take time, I might sort of do it a little bit more flat, or I might tip it. I'm going to do some squeeze. I know you probably can't see really that, but I'm going to squeeze in a little bit of ultramarine blue here and see what happens. get my smaller brush. I have some green mixed up here that I think I'll take advantage of. Looking back at my reference photo, it is nice and pretty light valued, almost white towards the what is actually the bottom. Holding it in this way, obviously, is the top of the shape. Up here, it's quite light in value, and then gradually gets darker. Keep tossing in a little bit of green here. I remember that that area wasn't. This one is a little bit odd because I want to sort of make a what seems like a believable negative shape for a leaf, and that was hard on my brain right there when I was trying to do it in upside down. Not crazy about that, but that's okay. That was what I was calling my rhinoceros, I think, originally. That's a whole sort of fun thing in itself, is defining objects through negative painting. And that's not really what this video is about, so there's just a little fun taste of that. You know, what I keep doing with this shape is starting off thinking I'm not going to do the darker sides. I think I'm going to stick with that. I'm sure I've confused you enough by now. I'm not caring so much about going over that, and actually it looks like the paper isn't really even holding that line very well anymore. But I'm just worried about building up some value on this shape and getting it to sort of a much darker hue up towards the top, and not just darker, but a little bit more less colorful. There's not very much light there at all. So this is a little bit of green still left, and let me see, I'm bringing in some indigo, some ultramarine blue, and I'm sure there's a touch of azo yellow in there to make it sort of greenish, but I'm going to come over here. This brush might not be big enough. Yeah. This is my number 10 of the silver brush. And this is just gonna, your number 12 would be okay here too, but I wanted to keep getting darker, especially as it meets up with the underside of the roof. That's our orangey thing. I'll do something with that as well. Now I may do this to tip it. This is a good example where I sort of wanted it flat there for a while, and the colors is kind of doing what I want. But now I want to control a little bit more which way the water is flowing, the water and the watercolor. Yeah, depending on how much paint you start getting on that area, it really is the underside of this green wall, because I am going to want it darker because it is away from the light. So I'll have to do that on another pass. I could sort of worry about it now, but like I said, let's call that enough. So these desaturated and grayed out dark greens and bluish greens and grayed out dark bluish greens will help make the greens of the tree that much more punchier, that much more pure, because I'm telling you more about just how intense yellow and yellow green this is by telling you what it's not. So having those things together helps. I think I'm going to let that dry. Okay.